Why did the room fall silent the moment she lifted her eyes? No one could explain it later. They only remembered the pause, that strange, heavy pause, like everyone suddenly sensed something they weren't supposed to see. She stood behind the dull gray registration desk, the kind most people walked past without noticing. Her light shirt matched the color of the walls too well, her hair tied back in a simple regulation ponytail that made her look like any other civilian working quietly at a naval base. For 8 months, she had blended into the background exactly as she intended. Invisible, unremarkable, forgettable. Until today. The morning rush at Naval Base Little Creek buzzed with the energy of graduation day. Families hurried through the corridor, laughing, carrying flowers, holding cameras. The smell of fresh bread from the DFAC mixed with the sharp tang of disinfectant that always lingered in military buildings. People moved with excitement, with pride. But she, M.N.A. Walsh, moved with practiced restraint. Every step measured, every gesture controlled, every word efficient. She stamped visitor badges with perfect rhythm, one every 2.3 seconds. No more, no less. Her consistency comforted people who didn't realize why they trusted her. She didn't demand attention. She didn't seek praise. She simply executed her duties with quiet precision, building an invisible perimeter of order around an otherwise chaotic event. But people weren't supposed to notice that. They weren't supposed to notice her at all. Petty Officer Jake Morrison certainly didn't. Not yet. He strutted into the corridor like he owned the place, fresh trident gleaming proudly on his uniform. 24, loud, confident, his ego still high from surviving Bud S. His team followed him with the swagger of men who had finally reached the summit of a brutal mountain. He saw her as he passed, a civilian, a desk worker, nothing more. "Hey there, receptionist," he called out, flashing his teammates an amused grin. "What's your rank?" The guys snickered. Morrison leaned on the counter like he expected her to be flustered, impressed, maybe intimidated. But her response came with a calm so steady it unsettled him. "Petty Officer Morrison, your guest list has been confirmed. Please direct your family to the designated area." No emotion, no hesitation, no fear. Just accuracy. Morrison blinked, thrown off by how precisely she pronounced his rank, as if she'd been doing it for decades. He shoved his paperwork across the desk a bit harder than he needed to, a frustrated attempt to regain dominance. "Do civilians like you even get what we do, or you just stamp papers all day?" Her hand didn't flinch. Her breathing didn't shift. She simply adjusted her clipboard and stood straighter, a posture so perfectly aligned it made Morrison's casual stance look sloppy. And that was the first crack in the illusion. Because across the corridor, Master Chief Rodriguez, 28 years in uniform, 15 of them in special operations, saw something no one else did. Posture, bearing, awareness. She moved like someone trained. Not trained to file paperwork, but trained to survive. Rodriguez narrowed his eyes, watching her subtly track movement in the corridor, watching how she checked the corner mirrors without turning her head, watching how her breathing shifted at changes in room volume, all tiny signs only someone like him would recognize. Before he could step closer, a radio crackled on the desk. "Basecom, confirmed suspicious activity at Gate 3. Walsh reached for the radio without looking, like her hand already knew the path, like she'd done this 1,000 times. Her voice slipped into a pattern she'd been trying for months to bury. "Basecom copy. Establishing comms with posts Alpha through Delta. Maintain overwatch on civilian channels until cleared." Overwatch. Morrison frowned. Civilians didn't use that word. Rodriguez felt his heart drop into his stomach. He had heard that tone before. In Afghanistan. In Yemen. In rooms filled with the kind of people who rarely lived long enough to retire. That calm, ice-steady control under pressure wasn't something taught at a desk. It was battlefield language. It was operator language. A worn challenge coin slipped from her clipboard as she moved to the radio console, clinking on the tile floor. Morrison bent to grab it, smirking at what he assumed was some base souvenir. But the second he saw the emblem, the smirk faded. He didn't recognize it, but Rodriguez did. His jaw tightened. He hadn't seen that specific coin in years, because people who owned that coin didn't hand them out casually. They didn't sell them at gift shops. They didn't display them on desks. They earned them in places that officially didn't exist. Walsh continued coordinating the radio checks as if she hadn't dropped anything at all. Her voice didn't waver. Her pulse didn't spike. She managed 6 frequencies like it was second nature, prioritizing, confirming, adjusting, directing. Morrison's teammates quieted, their arrogant conversation dying mid-sentence as they listened to her direct the bass like someone with rank she wasn't wearing. "Holy, she sounds like she's done this before," whispered Wilson, the youngest of the group. "It's just radio stuff," Morrison muttered, but even he didn't believe it anymore. Torres, their designated comms guy, leaned forward, studying her technique. "No, man, that is radio stuff. That's tactical comms. She's running it like a coordinated operation. Civilians don't do that." Morrison said nothing. For the first time all day, his confidence cracked. When Walsh finished the sequence, she secured the radio with a smooth, exact motion that screamed military, then quietly returned to stamping badges, like nothing unusual had happened. But the room felt different, like someone had just peeled back a layer of reality and exposed something glowing underneath. Morrison shifted uncomfortably, unable to explain why he suddenly felt like he was out of place, like he'd been barking at someone he shouldn't have, someone who didn't fit the mold he had shoved her into. Rodriguez stepped closer, studying her now with sharpened attention. She wasn't just a civilian. She wasn't just skilled. She was something else. Something hidden. Something dangerous. Families began taking their seats for lunch, but Rodriguez's mind wasn't on the ceremony. He watched the way she moved, automatically keeping her back to the wall, the way she subtly scanned exits without appearing to, the way she changed her body angle whenever someone approached faster than normal. Operators did that. Elite operators. "Morrison," Torres whispered nervously, "what if she outranks us?" Morrison swallowed hard. He hadn't considered that. He hadn't considered a lot of things. Walsh continued her tasks as if oblivious to the eyes now following her. But inside, behind the steady hands and calm breaths, a pressure tightened behind her ribs. She had spent 8 months trying to disappear. 8 months trying to be nobody. 8 months hiding in the one place she once belonged. But the mask cracked the moment she picked up that radio. And she knew it. She knew people like Rodriguez didn't miss details. She knew the SEALs had heard enough to question her. She knew the challenge coin shouldn't have fallen. She knew the secrecy she lived inside had just ruptured. She also knew one dangerous truth, the same truth she had tried to bury the moment she stepped into this base wearing civilian clothes. They cannot know who I am. Not yet. Not until everything else is safe. But the day wasn't over. The incident wasn't over. The real story hadn't even begun. And something was coming, a moment she had been trying to avoid. A moment she feared. A moment tied to a code she hoped she'd never have to speak again. But when the captain arrived later that day, when he heard her voice, when she answered the wrong question with the wrong level of precision, his face would go pale. Because he, unlike the others, would understand exactly what she was. And why she was hiding in plain sight. What made her keep her eyes lowered after the radio test? No one noticed the way her breath tightened beneath her calm exterior, or how her fingers hovered over the next badge just half a second longer than usual. It wasn't fear. It wasn't guilt. It was recognition, the cold realization that her cover had bent, maybe even cracked. And once a cover cracked, events had a way of accelerating on their own. The corridor swelled with movement as families finished their lunch and prepared for the ceremony. Children tugged on parents' hands, navy uniforms brushed past one another, and laughter ricocheted off the walls. But beneath that cheerful noise, she felt the shift. A subtle, invisible realignment in the room's energy. People were watching her now. Not all of them, just enough to make the hairs rise at the back of her neck. Rodriguez lingered at the edge of the hallway, pretending to review a clipboard, but really watching her posture, her movements, her reactions. Senior Chief Hawkins arrived minutes later, his gaze narrowing when he saw where Rodriguez was looking. Another two predators, she thought, not hostile but skilled, too skilled. They were starting to see her. Morrison's team, still clustered near the desk, had grown quieter. The swagger was gone, replaced with something tense and uncomfortable. They weren't sure what they'd just witnessed. They only knew it wasn't normal. Torres nudged Morrison's arm. "Dude," she ran that radio like she was in a TOC. "It's nothing," Morrison muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. "Civilians pick things up." "Like that coin you picked up," Torres shot back. Morrison shut his mouth because that coin still weighed heavy in his pocket. Something about the design, the edge, the markings, felt wrong. Not wrong as in counterfeit. Wrong as in this belongs to someone I should not mess with. Still, he didn't give it back, not yet. Pride made him keep it. Pride and the faint hope it was nothing. But inside, he felt something gnawing. He had mocked her. And she might not be anyone he had the right to mock. The ceremony preparation continued, and she moved through it flawlessly. She managed 2 conversations at once, tracked late arrivals, monitored foot traffic, and kept her breathing controlled despite the growing attention. But when she stepped away from the desk to retrieve extra forms from a nearby cabinet, Rodriguez watched something that made his stomach tighten. Her posture, her automatic reaction to a sharp noise behind her, wasn't civilian. Someone dropped a tray near the DFAC, a loud metallic crash. Everyone else flinched. She didn't. She pivoted sharply, identifying the source of the sound, assessing it, then returning to her task with barely a fiber of tension showing. Only military members with combat experience reacted like that. Only people who had lived through the wrong kinds of noises. Rodriguez exchanged a glance with Hawkins. "You see it," Hawkins murmured. "All of it," Rodriguez replied. He had seen people try to hide training before, but it never worked around men like him. Operators recognized their own, even when stripped of rank, badges, or uniforms. She wasn't just trained. She was deeply trained. And she wasn't just hiding experience. She was hiding identity. The ceremony officially began just after 1400. Admiral Thompson stepped onto the podium, his medals gleaming under the overhead lights. The base snapped into a formal hush that rolled outward like a wave. Families rose. Seals stood taller. The air thickened with pride. But as Thompson began speaking, Walsh felt something shifting inside her. Something she had worked so hard to control these past 8 months. His words were too familiar. Not because she'd heard them before, but because she had lived them. These men have endured adversity few will ever experience. Her chest tightened. They have learned sacrifice, commitment, and silent courage. Her fingers curled slightly at her sides. They carry the responsibility of protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Her eyes dropped to the floor for a moment, a small gesture, barely noticeable to most. But not to Rodriguez. Not to Hawkins. Not to anyone who had spent years watching battle-hardened men try to hide ghosts behind stoic expressions. Something in her face cracked, not visibly, not dramatically, but enough. Because she wasn't just reacting to the speech. She was remembering. The first SEAL stepped forward for recognition, Applause thundered. Families cheered, cameras flashed, the room vibrated with celebration. But her eyes softened in a way that revealed something unspoken. She missed it. Not the violence, not the missions, not the risk. She missed the purpose, the belonging, the identity she'd buried under a civilian shirt and a visitor badge printer. The Admiral continued calling graduates, each stepping forward with pride, each receiving applause as heavy as the trident pinned to their chest. And then something unexpected happened. The Admiral began recognizing those who had endured extraordinary hardship during training. Every operator knows that moment. It's where the stories live. The broken bones, the sleepless nights, the mental warfare. Her breath stuttered. She blinked rapidly, as if fighting something back. Rodriguez saw the shine at the corner of her eyes, the first emotional break in the armor. She wasn't cheering for them. She was remembering others who never stood on stages. Names she couldn't say. People she'd lost. People whose sacrifices remained in classified files, no one celebrated publicly. When the ceremony ended and the reception began, people drifted toward the refreshments. Families hugged their graduates. Officers shook hands. The buzz of pride returned. But she stayed at the perimeter, as if afraid to step closer. That's when Rodriguez approached. Not aggressively, not demanding. Just quietly. "Miss Walsh," he said softly, "have you had military training?" A simple question. A devastating one. Her hand froze above the radio equipment. She didn't look at him immediately. She might have survived the entire day undetected if it were anyone else asking. But Rodriguez wasn't guessing. He wasn't probing. He knew. She lifted her eyes slowly. Calm, composed, but her mask had a crack now, a small fissure where truth leaked through. "I've had some experience with procedures, Master Chief." "No," Rodriguez said gently. "Not some, a lot." She had no answer, because denying too strongly would reveal even more. Before she could craft a reply, Senior Chief Hawkins joined them, arms folded, expression tight with recognition. "Ma'am," he said respectfully, "I oversaw communications training for 15 years. People don't talk like you, move like you, or react like you unless they've been trained, deeply trained. Where did you learn tactical comms?" Her throat tightened. She could survive disrespect. She could survive arrogance. She could survive the whispers spreading through the base. But this, being seen, was something she feared more than any confrontation with Morrison. "Some questions," she said quietly, "are better left unasked." She didn't say it coldly. She didn't say it rudely. She said it like someone asking to be left alone, for reasons none of them understood yet. And before Rodriguez could reply, something else happened. Morrison approached. Awkward, nervous, no swagger now. "Miss Walsh, I wanted to apologize." He swallowed hard. "For earlier, what I said, how I acted, it was out of line." She looked at him for a long moment, not with anger, not with pride, but with something more complex, something sad. "Petty Officer Morrison," she replied, "military service teaches many lessons. Learning from mistakes is one of the most important." His shoulders dropped with relief. But her eyes told another story. She wasn't angry at him. She was afraid of what this day was forcing her to become again. What she thought she had left behind. Her anonymity was slipping through her fingers. And tomorrow, everything would change. Because somewhere deep inside her, one truth pulsed like a heartbeat. A truth Morrison, Rodriguez, and Hawkins would soon discover. She wasn't hiding from embarrassment. She wasn't hiding from judgment. She was hiding from danger. Hiding from enemies who believed she was dead. Hiding from a past that could destroy everyone who discovered it. And all it would take was one wrong question, or one wrong code, to drag that past back into the light. What if the real danger wasn't the questions being asked, but the questions she could no longer avoid? That thought flickered in her mind the following morning as she stepped through the main gate of Naval Base Little Creek with her usual calm stride. The sun was barely up, casting a soft, gold wash across the base, the kind of peaceful morning light that always made her chest ache with something she couldn't name. Memory, maybe, or loss. But today the peace felt hollow. Eyes followed her in ways they hadn't before. Whispers trailed her movements. Personnel who once greeted her casually now paused, as if cataloging something they had missed for months. She kept her face neutral, her breathing steady, but the pressure in her ribs was unmistakable. Someone knew. Someone had talked. The quiet was ending. She reached her workstation at 7:30 exactly as she always did. She arranged her pen, checked the day's guest schedule, reviewed the visitor checkpoint procedures. Routine, order, familiarity. The small rituals she'd built to keep herself anchored. But the room felt different. The air wasn't watching her. People were. By 7:45, she knew the shift wasn't imagined. Word had spread, the kind of word that travels only in military communities, through unseen channels and silent glances. And when Master Chief Rodriguez walked toward her with Captain Mitchell beside him, she understood instantly. This wasn't curiosity anymore. This was official. "Miss Walsh," Rodriguez said with the tone of someone relaying an order disguised as a request, "Captain Mitchell would like a moment of your time." She nodded calmly, though her pulse thudded quietly against her wrist. "Of course, Master Chief. When?" "Now," Mitchell said. His voice was firm but not unkind. "This morning, if possible." So this is it, she thought. The conversation I've been preparing to avoid. She followed them down the long corridor toward the administrative wing, a walk she had taken many times but never like this. The walls seemed narrower, the hallways quieter. Every step felt louder than usual, like her footsteps were announcing the unraveling of a life she'd carefully constructed. They reached Mitchell's office, secure, private, sealed behind a heavy door with a digital lock. He gestured for her to sit. Rodriguez positioned himself near the wall, arms folded. Hawkins soon joined, leaning beside a bookcase with a look that suggested he already suspected the truth. Mitchell didn't waste time. "Miss Walsh," he began, "we've received communication from higher authority indicating that your background may not match the civilian records we have on file." Her heart sank, though her face betrayed nothing. Higher authority. That could only mean one thing. Someone upstairs had finally put the pieces together. Mitchell continued, "We were told you may be operating under a protective identity. I need to ask directly, is that true?" She inhaled slowly. Silence stretched. Protective identity. Two words she hadn't wanted to hear again. Two words that could unravel 8 months of fragile peace. Her life, her cover, her effort to disappear, it all condensed into that moment. "Captain," she said softly, "my background is complicated." Rodriguez exchanged a knowing glance with Hawkins. Mitchell leaned forward. "I understand complicated. What I need to understand is whether we have a security issue on our base." She could have lied. She had lied well before, in the field under pressure during interrogations, even to people she had loved. But this time, lying would only prolong the inevitable. And something in her was tired. Tired of ducking into shadows. Tired of pretending she didn't know how to read a battlefield. Tired of hiding a lifetime behind a smile and a clipboard. So she exhaled and let the truth emerge, the first sliver of it. "My name is Chief Petty Officer M.N.A. Walsh," she said quietly, "formerly assigned to Dev Gru, Gold Squadron." The room fell still. Mitchell's expression froze. Rodriguez stopped breathing for a second. Hawkins's eyes widened with something close to disbelief. DevGru, the Tier 1 unit. The kind of place where legends were born and never spoken about. A place most sailors never even glimpsed. The idea that someone from Gold Squadron had been stamping visitor badges and printing passes was unthinkable. Mitchell swallowed. Chief, if that's true, then why are you here? Another silence. Heavier this time. Because the truth hurt. Even now. She placed her hands on her knees to steady herself. I cooperated with an NCIS investigation last year regarding arms trafficking within certain special operations channels. The officers in the room stiffened. Trafficking. Inside special operations. A scandal buried under layers of classification. I provided testimony against individuals who had compromised missions, endangered operators, and sold equipment to hostile groups, she continued. Some were arrested, others slipped through. Hawkins muttered a curse under his breath. Rodriguez looked sick. Mitchell sat back slowly, absorbing it. Chief, that means you're a target, she finished quietly. Yes, sir. The words hung between them like low thunder. She explained the rest with clinical calm. The way NCIS had recommended protective identity, the way she'd been relocated, the way she'd chosen civilian duties temporarily to avoid attention and recover from 12 years of operational burnout. Every sentence unraveled a piece of the mystery. Every detail drew the men deeper into the reality she'd been hiding. When she finished, the room was silent. Finally, Mitchell spoke. Chief Walsh, why didn't you come to us? She looked at him, really looked for the first time. Her eyes were tired, quietly haunted, carrying weight she had never intended to show. Because I needed to remember who I was without a rifle in my hands, she said softly. Without missions, without orders, without the burden of command. I needed to disappear long enough to breathe again. Rodriguez's jaw tightened. He understood more deeply than anyone else in the room. He had known operators who lost themselves after too many deployments. He had lost friends who never found their way back. But before any of them could respond, a sharp buzz sounded from Mitchell's secure phone. He answered, listened silently, then hung up with an expression that made her stomach drop. That was NCIS Special Agent Collins, Mitchell said grimly. She's on her way. There's been a development. She felt the blood drain from her face. What kind of development? Rodriguez asked. Mitchell exhaled. Yesterday's events may have compromised Chief Walsh's identity. Social media from the ceremony mentioned a civilian woman displaying tactical communication skills, enough detail that her location could be identifiable. A deep ache started in her chest. She had known the moment that radio crackled in her hand. She felt it. The shift. The unraveling. 8 months of invisibility, undone by one act of instinct. She whispered barely audibly, "No, no, no." Rodriguez leaned forward. "Chief, what does that mean? What kind of risk are we talking about?" She looked at him, no mask, no defenses, just cold honesty. "The kind of people who once hunted me," she said, "may know where I am again." The room chilled. Even Hawkins, who rarely showed fear, felt something stir beneath his ribs. And then the worst thought of all struck her, sharp, immediate, terrifying. If they come here, they won't just come for me. They'll come for anyone near me. Everyone on this base. The men in the room realized it at the same moment. Mitchell rose abruptly. "We need to secure this facility. Until NCIS arrives, no information leaves this room." Rodriguez nodded sharply, understood. Hawkins moved toward the door, locking it behind him. But she just sat there, hands folded, posture straight, eyes forward, looking more like a soldier receiving orders than a civilian trapped in an unfolding crisis. Because deep down she knew the truth. The past she had buried wasn't done with her. And soon she would have to reveal everything, even the secret code she had hoped never to use again. A code that would make the captain go pale. A code that would expose exactly who she had once been, and what she had done to survive. What did Collins find that made her drive straight to the base before dawn? That question hovered like a shadow in the room as they waited for the NCIS agent to arrive. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, pressurized, like the moment before a door breach when everyone's breathing sinks without meaning to. Walsh sat silently in the office, hands folded in her lap, her posture unbroken. She looked calm, controlled, unshaken. But her stillness wasn't peace. Her stillness was the absence of anywhere else to go. Inside, a storm churned. She knew what this meant. She had been trained for contingencies, for sealed identities, for extraction protocols and quiet disappearances. But she had hoped desperately that she wouldn't have to invoke them again. That hope was dying on the office floor. The door opened sharply at 8:30. Agent Rebecca Collins stepped in with a hardened look only years in counterintelligence could carve into someone's face. She nodded at Mitchell, then turned directly to Walsh, studying her with more worry than authority. "Chief," Collins said softly, "we have a problem." "Define problem," Walsh replied quietly. Collins didn't sit. She placed a secured tablet on the desk and typed a code only someone with her clearance would know. Lines of encrypted messages, photos, timestamps, and metadata flooded the screen. Mitchell's breath caught. Rodriguez muttered a curse. Hawkins stepped closer, his body tensing. Collins tapped a specific post, amplifying it. A photo taken by a proud parent during the ceremony, Walsh visible in the background, radio in hand, headset on, posture straight as a rifle barrel. Not a civilian posture, not a casual stance, a stance of command. Perfect, tactical, trained. The caption. Wild moment. One of the civilian staff ran VIP comms like she was special forces, or something flushed face respect. More posts. More comments. More visibility. Some harmless. Some ignorant. Some dangerous. One in particular made Collins' jaw clench as she tapped it open. A comment under the photo read, "She looks like Lighthouse." Every muscle in Walsh's body froze. Rodriguez looked confused. "Lighthouse, what's that mean?" Collins answered before Walsh could. "It's her call sign." The silence that followed was a blade. Mitchell stared at Walsh. "Someone recognized you." "Maybe," Collins said carefully. "Or maybe it's a troll or an old teammate guessing in the dark. We're still filtering the usernames. But the account that posted it has ties to a known watcher group. And watchers don't guess for fun." Walsh felt the oxygen thin around her. Watcher group. The same group who had monitored her movements before NCIS pulled her into protective status. The same network connected to the men she helped bring down. The same shadows she had thought she escaped. "I should have been more careful," she whispered. "No," Collins said firmly. "You reacted instinctively. What you did yesterday wasn't wrong, it was necessary. But it means your cover is no longer safe." Mitchell leaned forward, voice low. "Chief Walsh, are you in immediate danger?" She took a breath, slow, deliberate, controlled. "The danger isn't me, sir," she said quietly. "It's anyone near me if this leaks further." That landed hard. Mitchell rubbed his face, packing. Rodriguez looked at Walsh like seeing her for the first time. A woman who had been hiding a war behind a clipboard. A soldier who had lived in silence for too long. A survivor. Collins continued, "I've reviewed the posts. They don't name you, but the descriptions, your voice, your posture, your comms language, are enough for anyone familiar with Lighthouse to connect dots." Hawkins frowned. "Lighthouse, why that call sign?" Walsh closed her eyes for a moment. It hurt to revisit that story. Not because the name embarrassed her, but because of what it symbolized. I was the one who stayed awake, she said softly. During night ops, during surveillance, during the 18-hour breaches. I was the one keeping others oriented when everything else went dark. A long silence. Rodriguez swallowed. You were the anchor. Something like that, she said. Collins tapped again, shifting to a new screen. It showed a map, small, detailed, with red dots converging on the general location of the base. These are access pings, Collins said. Searches for Lighthouse DevGru spiked suddenly in the last 12 hours. Walsh felt her veins turn cold. If any of them are hostile, Collins continued, they know where to start looking. Mitchell's voice lowered dangerously. So what are our options? Collins switched screens. There are 4, she said. She explained each with clinical precision. Relocation. Complete identity change. Return to active duty under protected command. Integration into a secure base role matched to her true qualifications. As Mitchell and Collins discussed protocols, Walsh stared at the floor, not to avoid the conversation, but because a weight she thought she'd shed was crawling back onto her shoulders. A weight shaped like duty, like responsibility, like the past. She hadn't wanted to return to that life. Not fully. Not yet. But maybe you don't get to choose when your past calls you back. Rodriguez stepped closer, lowering his voice. Chief, what do you want? She lifted her eyes. In them there was something quiet. Not fear. Not anger. Resolve. Sir, she said carefully, I want to stop running. The room reacted like she'd detonated something under the floor. Collins straightened. Walsh. No, she continued, voice steady. I came here to disappear, to heal, to breathe. But the moment I touched that radio yesterday, I realized something. I'm not meant to vanish. I'm meant to teach, to protect, to guide. Hiding won't fix anything. Hawkins exhaled, almost a laugh. Everyone on this base could learn from you. Morrison's team flashed through her mind, their confusion, their regret, their unexpected humility. Young, arrogant, lost in their own pride until the truth of her skill humbled them. She could help them. Maybe she was supposed to. Mitchell nodded slowly. Then we take control of the narrative, not through rumor or secrecy, but by revealing who you are on our terms. Walsh's stomach tightened. A public reveal. A base-wide assembly, Collins confirmed. Controlled, clean, transparent enough to shut down speculation, and protective enough to keep the wrong people from twisting the truth. The idea terrified her more than any mission she'd ever undertaken. Crowds. Eyes. Questions. Recognition. The opposite of the invisibility she'd lived under. But maybe that invisibility had become another kind of prison. If I do this, she murmured, it has to be done right. No glorification, no exaggeration, no mythology, just truth. And your safety, Collins added, always your safety. Before they could plan further, a soft knock came at the door. Mitchell frowned. No one should be interrupting. The door opened slowly, cautiously. It was Morrison. He stood in the doorway with a look she had never seen on him before. Not arrogance, not bravado. Something closer to regret and confusion and concern. Sir, Morrison said, addressing Mitchell, sorry for interrupting, but we wanted to check on Miss Walsh. After yesterday, we heard something happened. Behind him stood Wilson, Torres, and Chavez, all rigid, uncomfortable, trying not to stare at Walsh but failing miserably. Mitchell exchanged glances with Collins. It was too soon. Too early. Too much. And yet, maybe perfect timing. Walsh met Morrison's eyes. The young man looked like he was facing down Judgment Day. Miss Walsh, he said quietly, If we caused problems, if we made things harder for you, we're truly sorry. We didn't know. We didn't understand. She studied them, 4 young operators who had started the day with pride and ended it with humility. She saw the sincerity in their shoulders, in their bowed heads. But she also saw something else. The beginning of growth. You didn't cause this, she said softly. You just accelerated the truth. Morrison blinked. Ma'am. She took a breath. Soon, she said, you'll know everything. The 4 men looked bewildered. Collins whispered to Mitchell, we can't delay anymore. Mitchell nodded, prepare the assembly. And in that moment, Walsh realized something she had been avoiding. She wasn't just stepping out of hiding. She was stepping back into responsibility, into leadership, into the person she had been before darkness forced her underground. Because sometimes, fate doesn't ask. It demands. And today, it was demanding her return. What if stepping into the light after years in the shadows didn't feel empowering, but terrifying? That question curled around her thoughts as she stood alone in the quiet hallway outside the auditorium, waiting for Captain Mitchell to call the base-wide assembly to order. The building's hum felt louder today, ventilation, distant footsteps, muffled chatter, all blending into a pressure that sat tight on her chest. She had stood before warlords. She had infiltrated compounds with a heartbeat in her throat. She had survived interrogations that blurred the line between pain and silence. But this room of friendly uniforms, this place she walked peacefully every day, felt more daunting than any battlefield. Because today she wasn't hiding. Today she wasn't pretending. Today the truth would step out of her own mouth. And truth, she'd learned, was heavier than any rucksack. You good? Collins asked quietly beside her. Walsh nodded, though she knew Collins didn't buy it. As good as I'll ever be. Remember, Collins said, softening, we control the message. No details you don't want to share. No pressure to prove anything, just honesty. Honesty, she thought bitterly, had its own battlefield too. Mitchell opened the auditorium door from inside. Chief, it's time. She inhaled once deeply, letting the air settle low in her lungs. Then she stepped inside. The room was full. Not chaotic, just full. Rows of sailors, chiefs, officers, and enlisted staff. Morrison's team clustered to the right, sitting straighter than they ever had. Hawkins occupied the first row, jaw locked. Rodriguez stood near the aisle, eyes tracking her with quiet solidarity. And above them all, the room's lights glowed soft, making everything seem too exposed. Every pair of eyes followed her as she walked toward the front. Some curious, some confused, some respectful, some uneasy. She kept her stride controlled, even though her pulse beat fast under her shirt. She took her place beside Mitchell at the podium. He cleared his throat. Thank you all for assembling so quickly, he began. What you're about to hear is sensitive, classified, and important to the security of our base. The room fell into stillness. Mitchell looked at Walsh. This is Chief Petty Officer Walsh, he said firmly, and it's time you knew who she really is. A ripple of shock rolled through the room. Murmurs, quick glances, Morrison's face drained of color. Walsh stepped forward. For a long moment, she said nothing. Silence had always been her first weapon and her last shield. She met the room with calm eyes. I owe you all the truth, she said quietly, and I owe myself the chance to stop hiding from it. A long breath. A settling of weight. Then she began. My name is Chief Petty Officer M.N.A. Walsh. I served 12 years with Naval Special Warfare, last assigned to Dev Gru Gold Squadron. The room seemed to exhale and inhale at the same time. Some jaws clenched. Some eyes widened. Some faces softened with recognition of what that meant. Gold Squadron wasn't mentioned. in casual conversation. It lived in whispers, classified footnotes, and memorial services without names. She continued, voice steady but edged with memory. For most of my service, I worked in communications operations, not radio checks, not desk work, real-time battlefield oversight, high-value data relay, electronic disruption, and intelligence interpretation on missions most of you have never heard about and never should. No dramatization, no embellishment, just truth in its simplest, heaviest form. But I wasn't just a communications operator, she added. I was assigned to intelligence intercept roles, embedded with teams, working in the shadows, doing things I'm not allowed to describe even now. Rodriguez lowered his gaze, not out of shame, but out of quiet respect. She swallowed before speaking again. 2 years ago, during a high-level investigation, I cooperated with NCIS to expose illegal arms movement within special operations channels. The people we brought down were not just criminals. They were dangerous. They were inside the system, and some of them had access to my identity. The entire room went still. My testimony helped put several men away, she said, but not all of them. Some escaped, some hid, some made threats. Her voice didn't shake, but her eyes carried the truth of what it meant to live with a target on your back. So NCIS put me under protected identity, she continued, and I agreed to step away, to disappear, to heal, to try to find myself somewhere quiet. She let the quiet settle across the room like dust. And I chose this base, she said simply, because it felt safe, because you all felt good, normal, human. Morrison stared at the floor, shame burning through him. But yesterday, she said, I reacted before I remembered I wasn't supposed to know how anymore. One moment of instinct exposed everything, and now the wrong people may be looking again. She paused. She needed them to understand the truth behind her choice. I didn't hide because I was ashamed, she said softly. I hid because I needed to breathe again. Because after years of missions, after losses I still carry with me, after watching too many good men fall, I didn't know how to live outside of a battlefield. Her voice thinned. I needed to learn how to be a person again. Hawkins' expression softened deeply, visibly, the way only someone who knew that kind of tiredness could. But today, she said, lifting her chin slightly, I realized something important. Hiding doesn't heal you. Purpose does. Service does. Being part of something bigger than your fear does. She scanned the room, not with arrogance, not with rank, but with quiet humanity. And if I can help this base, if I can help some of you avoid the mistakes we made, the losses we endured, then I want to stay. Not as a ghost, not as a rumor, but as me. The room shifted, not with noise, but with understanding. A collective exhale of tension, a recalibration of how they saw her. She wasn't a mystery anymore. She was something far more complicated, far more real. Rodriguez stepped forward, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. For what it's worth, he said loudly enough for the room to hear, every one of us is safer with her here. A murmur of agreement rose from the front rows. Even Mitchell nodded. But it was Morrison who stood slowly, uncomfortably, before guilt swallowed him whole. Chief Walsh, he began, voice cracking more than he intended. We didn't treat you right, and if we'd known even a fraction. Walsh raised a hand gently. No, petty officer. You weren't supposed to know. I hid. You reacted to what you saw, but now that you know the truth, you get to decide who you want to be next. His eyes burned not with tears, but with humility. I want to be better. I know, she said. Mitchell stepped back to the podium. We will be implementing new protections, new procedures, and new controls, he said. Chief Walsh will remain here in a role suited to her experience, under enhanced security. She will assist in training, communications oversight, and intelligence coordination as needed. The room accepted it, some with awe, some with relief, some with uncertainty about what happened next. But the shift had happened. The truth was out. Her past was no longer a secret. And whatever came next would come with eyes open, not blind. As the room began to dismiss, Collins leaned close and whispered, "You handled that better than anyone could have." Walsh inhaled slow, steady air. "It's not over," she said quietly. "The Watchers won't stop, they'll keep digging." Collins nodded. "Then we get ahead of them." Walsh looked around the room at the faces that no longer saw a receptionist, but a soldier rediscovering her place. Maybe purpose wasn't something you found alone. Maybe it lived in the people who needed you. And maybe, just maybe, she was needed again. Why did the auditorium feel so much emptier after everyone left? Walsh stood alone at the front of the room long after the assembly ended, long after officers and enlisted had drifted out in quiet knots of conversation. The benches were still warm from the crowd, but the silence left behind felt colder than she expected, hollow, like the echo of a life she hadn't meant to reveal. Collins lingered near the door, arms folded, watching Walsh with a mixture of concern and admiration. "You did what most operators can't," she said softly. "You let people see you." Walsh gave a small exhale, not exactly a laugh, not exactly a sigh. "Visibility isn't what scares me," she murmured. "It's what comes after." "Chief," Collins said gently, "whatever comes next, you're not facing it alone this time." That thought was both comforting and terrifying. She wasn't used to support. She wasn't used to being someone people protected. She wasn't used to letting others stand between her and danger. She walked out of the auditorium slowly, feeling the weight of eyes that weren't there anymore, eyes that had judged her, respected her, feared her, or understood her in ways she hadn't expected. The hallway was quiet. The world felt suspended. And for the first time since stepping onto this base 8 months ago, she no longer felt invisible. As she moved down the corridor, Rodriguez approached, falling into step beside her. "You held yourself together," he said softly, "more than most could have." "Thank you, Master Chief." He shook his head. "No, thank you for the truth, for the courage, and for trusting us with it." She looked at him surprised. Was it trust or necessity? Rodriguez gave her a knowing look. Sometimes those two things overlap. Maybe he was right. They reached the administrative wing. Hawkins was already waiting there, leaning against the wall with crossed arms, posture tense. "Chief," he said, straightening, "we're here for whatever you need." Whatever you need. Words she rarely heard, words she barely believed. "Thank you," she said quietly, "but right now I need space to think." Rodriguez nodded. "We'll give you that, but stay on base. Collins is tightening security. No movement outside without clearance." She didn't argue, she couldn't. Not now, not with the Watchers waking up. She stepped into her office, her safe little corner of the world, and the door closed behind her with a soft click. She sat at her desk and stared at the empty surface, the neat stack of forms, the badge printer, the headset, the radio equipment. These things had grounded her, anchored her. She touched the radio, fingers brushing the push-to-talk button, and felt something she hadn't let herself feel in months. Belonging. But with belonging came danger. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes, letting memories rise uninvited. Her last deployment. The last extraction. The mission compromised by someone who should have been an ally. The gunfire. The silence afterward. The faces that haunted her at night. The man she testified against, a man who knew her voice, her call sign, her habits, her fears. A man who wasn't in prison. She opened her eyes sharply. She couldn't let fear drive her. Not again. Her door creaked open. Morrison stepped in slowly, hands clasped behind his back like a schoolboy entering the principal's office. Miss, he swallowed, Chief Walsh. She didn't look up immediately, and that alone made him shift nervously. Yes, petty officer. I wanted to talk, if that's okay. She gestured to the chair across from her. Go ahead. He sat, shoulders hunched, eyes flicking between his boots and her face as if unsure which direction hurt more. I've been thinking a lot since yesterday, he began, about how I acted, how we acted. She tilted her head, and I was stupid, he said bluntly. Blind, disrespectful, you didn't deserve that, and if I'd known even a fraction. You weren't supposed to know, she interrupted gently. This wasn't about you or your behavior. Yesterday was complicated. But we still treated you like someone who didn't belong. His voice cracked slightly. Ma'am, you belonged here more than any of us. She studied him, this young man who'd walked with arrogance but now sat humbled, vulnerable. Do you know what belonging means, Morrison? She asked softly. He looked confused. Ma'am. It doesn't mean being the most skilled, she continued. It doesn't mean being the strongest. It means showing up even when you're afraid. It means telling the truth when it costs you. It means being willing to grow. He swallowed hard. I'm trying. I know, she said, and that's enough for now. His relief was visible, shoulders unclenching, breath releasing. But Morrison, she added, tone sharpening slightly, your apology matters only if your behavior changes, not just toward me, toward everyone. He nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am, absolutely. As he stood to leave, he hesitated. Chief, are you in danger? She met his eyes, a slow, steady connection. Yes, she said simply, but I know how to handle danger. That both reassured and unsettled him. He left quietly, closing the door behind him. She let her head drop for a moment. How many people would she drag into this? How many would get caught in the crossfire of a past she couldn't outrun? A knock interrupted her thoughts. This one wasn't hesitant. It was firm, controlled, like someone with authority or familiarity. Come in, she said. The door opened, and there he stood. Commander Owens, her former squadron commander. Her breath caught, heart thudding once hard. He was supposed to be deployed. He was supposed to be overseas. He was supposed to be far away from this life she'd tried to leave. Instead, he stepped into her office wearing the same calm strength he always had. Chief, he said quietly. Her throat tightened. Sir, why are you here? He closed the door behind him. I heard what happened, he said. Collins briefed me, and before anything else, I needed to see you myself. She didn't know whether to stand, salute, cry, or collapse. You shouldn't have come, she whispered. Maybe not, he replied, but I did. He stepped closer, not invading her space but anchoring it. You're not alone in this, he said. Not now, not ever. Her eyes burned not with tears, but with the ache of memory. You taught me that family isn't blood, he continued. It's the ones who stand with you when the world goes dark. She looked down, trying to steady herself. Sir, the Watchers. Let them watch, he said, voice firm. They don't scare me. They should, she murmured. They know who I am. And I know who you are, he countered, which means they'll never get to you without going through me. Emotion swelled in her chest, sharp, unexpected, overwhelming. She had spent so long carrying everything alone that the idea of someone standing beside her felt almost unreal. What now? She whispered. Owens took a slow breath. Now, he said, we prepare. For what? For whatever's coming. She held his gaze steady, strong, unshaken. She wasn't the same woman who arrived here months ago. She wasn't a ghost anymore. She wasn't hiding. She was standing. And standing meant something was waking inside her, something she thought she'd buried for good. Not violence. Not vengeance. Not fear. Duty. the part of her that guided others through darkness, the part that whispered courage when everything else broke. Lighthouse. And as Owen stepped closer, lowering his voice to a tone meant only for her, he said the words she had never expected to hear again. "Chief, it's time to bring back the code." Her pulse stilled. The code. The one that made captains go pale. The one only a handful of people knew. The one tied to a mission, buried, so deep it never officially existed. The code she hoped she'd never have to speak again. She swallowed, breath shaking once. "Sir," she whispered, "if I say it, there's no going back." Owens nodded. "I know," he said, "but hiding is over and the people coming for you, they only fear one thing." She stared at him, knowing exactly what he meant. They fear Lighthouse. And for the first time in months, she felt like herself again. Not a shadow. Not a cover. Not a ghost. A soldier. What if the moment you've been running from your entire life suddenly walked right through your door? That question hung in the air as Commander Owen studied her, not like a superior evaluating a subordinate, but like a man staring at someone who had carried too much alone for too long. Walsh felt the old instincts rising in her chest, the tightening, the focus, the way sound changed when danger approached. She hadn't felt that shift in months, maybe years. It was terrifying how fast it returned, how automatic, how familiar. She swallowed. "Sir, if I bring the code back, they'll know." Owens nodded slowly. "Yes, and that's exactly why we have to. They'll come faster. They're already coming." She looked away, heart pumping a heavy, slow rhythm. "I stayed quiet for a reason." "You stayed quiet to survive," he corrected gently. "But now survival isn't enough, not with what's moving in the shadows." She hated that he was right. She hated that he knew her well enough to say it. She met his gaze again. "What did Collins tell you?" she asked. Owens sighed, not with frustration, but with the weight of someone carrying too much classified truth. He took a step closer, lowered his voice, and dropped the kind of information that made her spine stiffen. "They didn't just find that picture, Chief," he said. "They posted it." Her mouth dried. "Where?" "Dark channels, encrypted threads, 2 forums I won't name out loud." Collins intercepted the chatter, but not fast enough. She felt cold settling under her skin, not fear but clarity. "What did the threads say?" Owens looked at her, jaw tight. "They didn't ask who you are, they asked where." A chill crept through her. That meant one thing. They already knew Lighthouse wasn't dead. She stepped back, leaning against the desk. "How long do we have?" "Could be hours, could be days, but I'd bet on hours." A hollow breath escaped her. "And the base, the people here, Morrison's team, they don't know what's coming." "No," Owen said quietly, "and they shouldn't, not yet." The door opened suddenly. Hawkins stepped in, breath tight, eyes sharp. "Commander, Chief, urgent update." Owen straightened. Walsh braced. Hawkins hesitated for a fraction of a second, then delivered the blow. Collins intercepted a message from an unregistered satellite phone. It was routed through 3 foreign servers. Walsh felt her stomach turn. What did it say? Hawkins met her eyes. "Lighthouse confirmed, moving to location." Silence slammed into the room. Owens cursed under his breath. Hawkins continued, voice low. "There's more. They attached a timestamp. The message was sent 20 minutes ago." 20 minutes. Which meant they're already on U.S. soil, Walsh whispered. Owens nodded grimly. "And they're not coming alone." She closed her eyes for a moment, not to block the fear, but to anchor herself. She had known this moment would come someday. She just didn't expect it now. Not like this. Not when she had finally begun to feel human again. "Activate the code," Owens said softly. Walsh opened her eyes. "Sir, if I say it, Command will pull every classified file tied to Operation Helios. They'll unseal everything. They'll protect you, Owens corrected. Officially, completely, with the force of the Navy behind you. She looked at him, really looked, seeing the weight he carried too. The missions they'd survived. The ones they lost. The nights they stayed awake in tents listening to the wrong names whispered in the dark. Say the code, he repeated. Her throat tightened. I don't know if I'm ready. You're not, he said gently. None of us ever are, but readiness has nothing to do with it. This is who you are. She looked down at her hands, steady, calm, capable hands that had guided whole teams through storms of chaos. Hands that had patched wounds and loaded magazines and written goodbye letters that were never sent. Lighthouse. A title she didn't choose. A burden she didn't ask for. A truth she couldn't escape. Then came the soft knock. Rodriguez stepped inside, posture tight, concern etched across his face. Chief, he said carefully, there's something you need to see. Owen stiffened. What now? Rodriguez handed Walsh a tablet. One of the SEAL candidates from yesterday posted a TikTok. It's blowing up. It hasn't spread outside the base yet, but... Walsh tapped play. It was Morrison, talking to the camera in a shaky whisper. Guys, something weird is happening at the base. That civilian woman I made a joke to yesterday. She's not who we thought. The officers just did a huge assembly. They shut down half the corridors. I think she might be. The clip ended abruptly, mid-sentence. Walsh's pulse spiked. Owen's voice dropped to a dangerous level. Please tell me this wasn't posted publicly. Rodriguez breathed out shakily. It was, but only for 6 minutes before one of the chiefs took it down. 6 minutes, Owens growled. 6 minutes is enough for it to be screen-recorded 1,000 times. Walsh felt nausea creep into her throat. This was spiraling. Faster than any of them could manage. Faster than even Collins could contain. They'll triangulate me, she whispered. Through the video, through his voice, through the background audio. They already are, Owens replied. She closed her eyes. Collins burst into the room then, phone in hand, breathing hard. Chief, Commander, we have a problem, a serious one. Walsh didn't have to ask, she already knew. But Collins said it anyway. We found an unregistered drone flying low on the outer perimeter. It didn't violate airspace, but it circled twice. Slow, purposeful. Owen's expression hardened. They're scouting. Collins nodded. Walsh inhaled slow, deep, steady. A switch flipped inside her. Something ancient and ingrained. Something she had buried under civilian clothes and morning routines. She stood tall, taller than she had in months, and the room shifted around her. Not because she changed posture, not because she said anything, but because she remembered who she was. She turned to Owens. I'm ready. Owens nodded once. Say it. She closed her eyes. Her breath shook, then steadied. And she whispered the code, the one she hadn't spoken in years, the one locked behind layers of classified clearance, the one tied to missions that never made the news and never would. A code that, once spoken, alerted top brass, sealed entire wings, rerouted intelligence networks, and triggered protective action around one single person. The room reacted instantly. Owens went still. Collins paled. Rodriguez's breath caught. Hawkins took a step back like the air had shifted. Because it had. Walsh opened her eyes. It's done, she whispered. There's no going back. No, Owens said, but now we fight on our terms. She exhaled, shaky, rattled but grounded. For months she had lived in the shadows. Now the shadows were coming for her. And she wasn't running anymore. She was standing. And a lighthouse doesn't run from the storm. It faces it. Lights burning. So others don't drown. What if the moment you feared most didn't break you, but revealed who you had been all along? That question pulsed through her mind as the bass erupted into motion the second the code left her lips. It wasn't chaos, it was precision, controlled urgency, a shift in atmosphere so sharp the walls themselves seemed to straighten under the weight of its meaning. Lock every external entry, Owens ordered. Seal comms to level 3, Collins added. Notify intel, no outgoing signals, Hawkins snapped. Everyone moved with the kind of focus that comes from knowing something enormous had just woken up, something they didn't fully understand, but absolutely respected. But Walsh didn't move. Not yet. She stood still, fingers curled slightly at her sides, listening to the bass reorganize around her. It sounded familiar, too familiar, the distant thud of boots, the clipped radio chatter, the sharp notes of tension threading through the air. For the first time in 2 years, she was not pretending to be something less than what she was. She was Lighthouse again. At least, the part of her she had never been able to bury. Collins approached, breath tight but steady. Chief, NCIS Command just acknowledged your code. They want an immediate secure debrief. Walsh shook her head slowly. Not yet. Not yet, Collins blinked. Walsh, you just triggered the highest protection protocol we've got without using an emergency beacon. Why not now? Because we don't have the full picture, Walsh said softly. Someone out there does. Owen stepped beside her. She's right, intelligence before action. Hawkins nodded sharply. We need to know who's here, how many, and what they want now that Lighthouse is no longer a rumor. Walsh didn't correct him. They didn't want Lighthouse. They wanted the truth she carried, the truth she'd buried deep in sealed testimony files, encrypted flash drives, and memories she wished she could forget. But truth never stays buried. And predators never stop hunting. Chief, Rodriguez said quietly, what's our play? She looked at him, at all of them, and realized something she hadn't expected. They weren't waiting for orders from Owens. Not from Collins. Not from Mitchell. They were waiting for her. She'd spent months trying to fade into the background, but the second the truth emerged, these hardened men, leaders, chiefs, commanders, all instinctively shifted toward her. Waiting. Following. Trusting. Because Lighthouse didn't lead through rank. She led through presence. And she felt that weight settle on her shoulders again, heavy, familiar, grounding. First, she said softly, we find out if the Watchers are already inside. Hawkins stiffened, inside the base. Walsh nodded. They don't announce themselves. They infiltrate. They blend. They exploit routine and familiarity. Trust me, they won't come at us guns blazing. She paused, letting the memory settle. They'll come quietly, the same way rot spreads through wood. Owens watched her, pride threading through his expression. So we isolate the infection. She nodded, exactly. She walked toward the operations table, the one no civilian ever touched, and everyone instinctively stepped aside. She placed her hands on the cool surface and stared at the base map, letting her mind shift into operational calm. Perimeter weak points. Blind spots. Maintenance tunnels. Backup power stations. Wireless dead zones. The Watchers didn't need numbers. They needed needle access points. Quiet entry. Quick grab. Disappear with the target. Disappear with her. She traced a finger toward a cluster of buildings near the back of the compound. Here, she murmured. Collins frowned. Dormitory C. 2 blind corners, Walsh whispered. Small utility corridor. No cameras. Maintenance staff rotate every 3 hours. Rodriguez's eyes widened. My God, they could already be there. Owen's voice hardened. Then we move. No, Walsh said firmly. Everyone looked at her. We don't chase shadows. They want me isolated. They want to separate me from command, That's their play. So what's yours? Hawkins asked. She lifted her head slowly, and in her eyes was the clarity she had spent 2 years trying to extinguish. We draw them out. By doing what? Rodriguez asked. She exhaled. We make them think I'm alone. The room froze. Collins shook her head sharply. Absolutely not. You're the target, you're not bait. We don't sacrifice our asset. Then don't sacrifice me, Walsh said quietly. Stand back. Let me be who I am. Owen stepped closer, lowering his voice. Chief, if you do this, you risk everything. I've already risked everything, she replied. The moment I said the code, the storm began. Now let me face it. He stared at her, searching her eyes for doubt. He found none. Rodriguez clenched his jaw. We can't let her walk into a trap alone. She won't be alone, Walsh said. She'll just look like she is. Hawkins understood first. Shadow formation, he whispered. Silent backup. Walsh nodded. Collins exhaled in relief and worry. You walk, we stay invisible if anyone approaches. You intervene, Walsh finished, fast and quiet. The plan formed quickly, like muscle memory. They moved through the base with casual precision, Walsh in front, the others drifting at distances that looked accidental to any outside observer. Sailors and staff moved aside as she passed, some nodding hesitantly, others just staring with newfound respect, curiosity, or unease. She kept her expression calm, her stride steady, her pulse low. But inside, the switch had fully flipped. She was scanning everything. Shadows, angles, stride patterns, breathing rhythms behind walls, metal tension in hinges, heat signatures near vents. Every sense sharpened, every instinct alive. She approached Dormitory C, the target zone, and stopped at the corner. The air felt heavier here, still, too still. She walked forward alone. Boots quiet, breath steady, heart controlled. And then she heard it. A slight shift of weight behind the utility shed. Quiet, careful, too careful. Someone was there. She didn't turn her head. She didn't break stride. She simply said softly into the air, I know you're watching. Silence. Footsteps behind the shed froze. But you followed the wrong woman, she whispered. A man stepped out, face hidden, clothes plain, posture too rigid for a civilian. His hand hovered near his jacket, too close to where a weapon would be. Walsh stopped, stared, and recognized the eyes. She felt her chest hollow out. You, she breathed. He smirked, hello, Lighthouse. Her blood went cold. He wasn't just a watcher. He was the one she feared most, the one who vanished after the testimony, the one tied to the traffickers, the one who once shared an operation with her before betraying their team. Still hiding behind others, he sneered, still pretending you didn't ruin everything. Walsh's voice was barely audible. You killed people who trusted you. And you destroyed people who paid me, he snapped. He stepped closer, slow, deliberate. And now, he said, I'm here to finish what you started. Walsh inhaled sharp quiet. That's the difference between us, she whispered. You destroy, I protect. He laughed quietly. You protect no one, you're alone. No, Walsh said softly, you are. A faint rustle of movement. A shift in shadow. He turned slowly. Rodriguez emerged first. Then Hawkins, Collins, Owens, and 3 more armed responders. The man paled for the first time. Walsh took a step forward. You wanted Lighthouse, she murmured. You got her, but you forgot one thing. He backed away, breath shallow. Walsh's voice softened, razor sharp. Lighthouses don't stand alone. They guide those around them. He reached for his weapon. Collins moved first, faster than lightning, pinning his arm. Rodriguez swept his legs. Hawkins restrained him. Owens locked the cuffs. The man screamed in anger and fear, in disbelief. Walsh stood over him. Calm, steady, unshaken. You don't get to decide my ending, she said quietly. He snarled through gritted teeth. This isn't over. She held his gaze. No, she whispered, but I am. He glared at her, and she realized something. He wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of failing. And today he failed. He was dragged away screaming. The air loosened. Her shoulders sank. Her breath released. Her hands slackened at her sides. Owen stepped beside her. You okay? She thought about lying, then shook her head. Not yet. Rodriguez placed a hand gently on her back. But you will be. Collins nodded. You saved lives today again. She looked at them. These people she hadn't expected to care about, hadn't expected to protect, hadn't expected to trust. And something inside her shifted. Not back to the battlefield. Not back to the woman who'd lost her way in endless missions. Not back to the ghost hiding behind false names. Something new. Something steady. Human. Grounded. Purpose. She inhaled deep, slow, true. What now? Hawkins asked softly. Walsh smiled, small, tired, real. Now, she said, I stop running. Rodriguez nodded. And stay. She looked at the base, at the corridors she'd walked in silence, at the people who now walked beside her, at the life she hadn't meant to rebuild. Yes, she whispered, I stay. Owens rested a hand on her shoulder. You reclaimed your name, he said, your place, your purpose. She nodded, and in a voice that carried like a soft, steady beacon through the morning air, she said the words she had needed to hear herself say. Sometimes dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't fight. It doesn't demand to be seen. She looked toward the horizon. It simply stands and lets its light speak for itself.